Welcome to the deep dive. So picture this market, right? It's absolutely vital for a serious medical need, but at the same time, it's constantly under this intense spotlight because of the risks involved. So the question is, how does an industry like that not just, survive, but actually grow, especially when its main product is, well, right in the middle of a huge public health debate? That's really the puzzle we're digging into today. We're doing a deep dive into the oxycodone market. We took all the analysis you sent us, the articles, research, our notes, and boiled it down, trying to get to the core insights for you. And what jumps out right away, I mean, it's hard to miss, is the money side. The projection shows this market growing from about what, $3.4 billion in 2025, all the way up to nearly $5 billion by 2035. That's a steady climb, almost 4% growth every year.
It really is quite the paradox when you think about it.
Yeah.
Because on one side, you have all this public concern, massive regulatory hurdles, the whole opioid crisis background. But still, the market just keeps expanding steadily. And what's really fascinating and what we want to unpack is digging into the fundamental medical needs that keep pushing this growth forward, even with all those obstacles in the way.
Exactly. So our mission really is to give you a kind of shortcut to get you properly informed about how this critical market actually works, all the complex stuff. We'll hit the product trends, how it's distributed, the global picture, without making your head spin. Let's try and untangle this thing. Okay, so maybe start at the basics. Why is oxycodone still so widely used, despite everything? What's it primarily for?
The sources we looked at really hammer home its key role in managing moderate to severe pain. We're talking about things like intense cancer pain, recovering from big surgeries, or those really difficult chronic pain situations. Yeah, and doctors keep using it because, well, its effects are pretty predictable, and it gives them flexibility with dosing,
Yep.
They can adjust it carefully for each patient. It's a powerful option when used right. But, and this is crucial, we have to say it right from the start,
Yeah.
these clinical benefits always have to be weighed against some serious regulatory issues and safety concerns. It's this constant balancing act.
Okay, so given that context, where's the money actually going within the market? The analysis really flags long-acting oxycodone, says it's nearly 2/3 of the whole market. So why? What's the story there? Why is that specific type so dominant?
Well, its dominance really comes down to patient needs, particularly for people dealing with chronic pain. Think about the need steady relief,
Yeah.
Around the clock. Long-acting versions give them that consistency, which makes a huge difference in their quality of life.
Yeah.
Lessens the need to keep taking pills all day. But, and this is a really key point for investment, a big driver for that market share is the huge amount of work and money drug companies have poured into abuse-deterrent technologies for these long-acting pills. They're basically designed to make them harder to misuse, crush, dissolve, inject, that kind of thing. So the idea is to make them safer.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, so shifting gears slightly to how it's used, the applications. No real shocker here. Pain management is the giant, right? Over 80% of the market, sources say, used for everything from cancer pain, neuropathic pain, that's like nerve damage pain.
Exactly, persistent pain from nerve issues.
And also post-op recovery. Yeah, pretty broad.
And this brings us, right back to that big public discussion, the opioid crisis. Despite those very real, very serious worries, doctors do still prescribe oxycodone. But, and this is a big but, it happens under incredibly strict monitoring rules. These rules are specifically there to try and make sure it's used responsibly to minimize the risks as much as possible. The deeper thing here, I think, is seeing how the medical world constantly wrestles with this, balancing the genuine need for effective pain relief, especially in really severe cases, against the absolute need to protect public health and safety. It's a tough call for doctors, often.
Okay, so it's prescribed. How does it actually get to the patient? The analysis points to retail pharmacies as the main channel. Almost 3/4 of all sales go through them. Why them? What makes retail pharmacies the go-to?
Well, mostly it's about practical stuff and patient support. Retail pharmacies are everywhere, right? So easy access for patients, that's really important for sticking to a pain plan. But beyond just handing over the pills, pharmacists play this absolutely critical role. They offer counseling, they check prescriptions really carefully for any red flags, make sure people are following the monitoring programs. If you connect that to the bigger picture, it just shows how it takes a whole system approach, everyone working together to manage how these opioids are distributed safely and responsibly.
Okay, but it's not smooth sailing. Let's talk about the headwinds, the challenges. What are the biggest hurdles that everyone involved, companies, doctors, pharmacists, are dealing with?
Yeah, there are some major pressures. First, you've got the incredibly intense regulatory scrutiny, especially in the U.S. It puts enormous pressure on literally every step, from the manufacturer right down to the person writing the script. Then, you can't ignore the inherent risks. dependency, and overdose. They're always looming concerns with opioids. Always. And finally, there's the sheer cost involved. Huge costs from lawsuits, plus all the resources needed for these extensive monitoring systems. And the result of all that pressure, you see a lot of doctors actively looking for non-opioid options. They're often prioritizing those, especially for patients outside the hospital or needing long-term pain management, whenever it's clinically feasible.
But it's not all challenges. Despite all that, the market's still moving. There are opportunities, right? What kinds of innovation or trends are pushing things forward?
Absolutely. There's definitely forward momentum. One huge area is just continuing to develop better abuse-deterrent formulations. Building on what we talked about earlier, we're also seeing more sophisticated extended-release versions coming out. And interestingly, combinations with other drugs like naloxone.
Naloxone, that's the overdose reversal drug?
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
an opioid antagonist.
Yeah.
So when you combine it in the pill with oxycodone, the idea is if someone tries to tamper with it, like crush it to misuse it, then naloxone gets released and can cause unpleasant withdrawal symptoms. So it deters abuse that way, hopefully improving safety, but still providing the pain relief needed. Beyond the tech side, there's also just this growing, persistent demand for good palliative pain management,
Right.
for serious illnesses. That's driven by the aging global population, especially in places with developed healthcare. That demographic shift alone creates a real ongoing need for effective pain options.
That's a good point about the global picture. So let's zoom out a bit more. Can you give us a quick snapshot of how different key regions are playing out in this market growth?
Sure. So in the United States, growth is running just over 5% a year, mostly for severe stuff like cancer pain, major trauma cases.
Okay.
The United Kingdom is pretty similar, also around 5% growth, again, largely focused on oncology and palliative care.
Right.
The European Union is actually a bit higher, 5.4% growth, and there seems to be a really strong push there towards using camphor-resistant formulations more widely.
Interesting.
Japan comes in at 5.3% growth. They tend to be more conservative with opioid prescriptions overall, mostly used for cancer and recovery after orthopedic surgery. And then South Korea stands out. It's the fastest growing of this group, nearly 6% annually. That seems to be fueled by more surgeries happening, plus their regulatory system for opioids is still kind of evolving and getting more established.
Wow, okay. So definite regional variations there within the overall upward trend. All right, final big piece, the competition. Who are the main companies in this space, and what are they doing strategically to kind of navigate this really tricky environment?
Yeah, the analysis names the big players: Purdue Pharma, Teva, Mallinckrodt, Hikma, Sun Pharma, and Amneal. Those are the key ones. And their strategy, it's pretty consistent across the board, actually. They're all heavily focused on developing and promoting extended release and tamper-resistant products. It's a clear strategic direction.
Makes sense. It hits both needs.
Exactly. It meets that market demand for effective, long-lasting pain relief, but it also directly addresses those heightened regulatory demands for safer options.
Yeah.
We see specific examples, too, like Teva Pharmaceuticals just got FDA approval for a drug called ROXY-bond-D. It's an immediate release tablet, but it has that abuse-deterrent tech built in.
Okay.
And on a different note, Elite Pharmaceuticals recently launched a generic version of Percocet, which is important because it helps make treatment more affordable, potentially expanding access. So when you pull it all together, what we've really looked at today is how this oxycodone market operates in this incredibly complex space. It's constantly trying to balance, that critical need in medicine against these really strict and necessary regulations.
Right. And that projected growth heading towards nearly $5 billion by 2035, it's more than just a figure. It really underlines that effective pain management is still absolutely essential in healthcare, despite all the valid concerns. And it seems clear the path forward, success in this market, it really hinges on companies doubling down on safety, pushing innovation in these formulations, and just rigorously sticking to compliance. Those seem to be the factors that will really shape where this market goes. So thinking about all this, especially the advances in making these drugs harder to misuse and that undeniable global need for pain relief, what future developments do you think could really change the game, fundamentally shift that balance between giving people access to medicine they need and protecting public safety? What really stands out to you after digging into all this?